you only like cherry blossoms because you went with your grandfather and you're 5 years old and you have
And he's dead
nostalgic
now.
memories.
No.
But this is actually super overrated. Look how dumb those flowers look. It's so stupid. I don't want to come across as the old man yelling at the clouds. I really don't want to, but that may end up happening to me. But I felt this way even when I was a young lad, even when I was a spry young gamer. There are certain ways that people talk about games, particularly online, that tend to drive me really, really crazy. It's just like it's a huge pet peeve, bothers me to no end. We're going to be doing 2 episodes talking about one and the other. Okay. One I've talked about in the past. I hate the word overrated.
Oh, geez.
I hate the way that people use that as some kind of blanket dismissing, hand-waving criticism of something with absolutely no substance. Yeah. But that's not today's episode.
No.
Today's episode...
But it is not this day.
We're talking about, are you actually blinded by nostalgia? Yeah. What does that really mean, and is that actually possible?
Is that even a thing?
Is that even a thing?
Or is that an extreme hyperbolic?
It is such a common thing to see.
Oh, yeah.
When you're having your online debates about whether such and such classic PS1 game is good or not, and rose-tinted glasses, you're blinded by your nostalgia, that I don't think people really even understand what they're saying when they say this. And so just for the sake of, resolving my own frustrations, I'm going to come out and yell at clouds today about why you shouldn't say this, because it's dumb.
Because it's dumb.
It's really stupid when you think about it.
Over. Here's a fun one. Shouldn't we all see the world with rose-tinted glasses?
I would love
What's
to
the problem
get
with seeing the world?
I love your perspective on this part of it.
Yeah.
So let's start there before I start yelling at people.
First off, people. Nostalgia is not a bad thing. Nostalgia is a beautiful feeling, and there is a deep, personal, subjective connection. Subjective is not a bad word, by the way. Neither is nostalgia.
That's another one.
Why? When did all these things become bad
subjective,
words?
You only...
if subjective is bad, even though that's what everyone is?
The only way to give an appropriate or accepted sort of critique of something is if you are approaching it objectively.
Yeah, super highbrow, completely detached, no emotion whatsoever. Are you kidding me? This is art we're talking about, man.
Yeah.
Art's hard enough to define on its own, right? For us to then put these objective measures of how we're supposed to analyze and value our artwork pieces, our masterpieces, and what can be defined as such. Oh, you rabble with your nostalgia and your subjectivity. Give me a break, man. Art is meant to be an emotionally deep, connecting experience. It can even be a binding experience, for a culture, for a people, for the whole world, right? If everyone can resonate with something, this is something that is way deeper than just the rational faculties, which only are 6% of your brain processes, right? There's so much going on deep below the surface that's important and good, and subjective, although it may be. The subjective world is the only world that you will ever experience. And whoever you are, the subjective world is your world, right? And nostalgia is it's beautiful. It's good. Don't feel bad for having a connection to something that you enjoyed as a child, even though maybe it doesn't hold up so great now that you're a critical thinking adult, right? Don't feel bad for that. I feel like this is maybe the problem that I see with a lot of the, a lot of comments and people who they're trying to make you feel bad for having this deep, emotional, resonant connection with something that is deeply meaningful to you. And you don't have to feel bad about that, right? And even as you get older and you're okay, and maybe to save face, I liked it when I was a kid, but I don't deal with that stuff anymore. I'm a grown man. Put that crap away. Seriously, put that away. All right. Nostalgia's good. Subjectivity is good. Objectivity has some serious problems with it, especially in the modern era when everyone's trying to be so objective. We're just like floating away into space. It's like your head is completely detached from your body, right? Your body is where you live life. Your brain is like how you rationally like make decisions and stuff, but they have to work together. Like your body is your brain, right? It doesn't just end here. It extends into your whole being. I don't know how long I could rant on this for a very long time. And I've got all sorts of ideas here, especially with, I don't know, that are very relevant to this particular debate. But like, I don't know, what do you feel? What do you feel about this concept that nostalgia and subjectivity are somehow bad and you should feel bad for them?
So I agree with a lot of what you're saying. I think there has been somehow this idea propagated that like if you that you need to detach yourself from, and I guess I understand it to a certain extent. Like if you want to look at something without pure bias, right? There is some level to which you must not detach entirely, but just sort of like acknowledge.
That fair enough. That's actually good.
Yeah.
That's a great way to approach
biases,
this.
Acknowledge your subjective relative experience and say, this colors how I see this to some degree.
You know, I'm going to cut you off briefly to also point out that there are excesses of nostalgia where you can only ever consume the things that you had as a kid. It's almost like you're trying to just be a child again. And while that's beautiful and good, it is,
you don't want to live
you do
there.
Also have to live in who you are now, which would be an adult.
We've talked about this a lot.
Yeah, there's excesses on both sides. You do need to incorporate some level of objectivity, but you don't have to leave the subjective. You don't have to leave the nostalgic completely.
It should not be said that your subjective experience with something, it has no place in your analysis of said thing.
Yeah,
like that is to remove the art from it entirely.
That's the whole point of art,
which is the whole point.
Art is not about rational objectivity.
No,
it isn't, and you're missing the point
about
if you're treating it that way.
Your emotions, your feelings, the context of the time period, all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But so I think that is a excellently made point and something that people should consider in this. But my like real annoyance with this term is more about the presumption of the person making the statement.
Hence my, my English accent thing.
We have David.
I love English,
here.
By the way. English people are dope.
We have David here in our Patreon chat for when we record these live.
Yeah.
Who puts it in a really good way to sort of like lead this part of my point. In case you want to use it again, my rebuttal to you just like it because of nostalgia, that almost always, what it actually almost always means is you only liked it because you didn't know any better at the time, and it's embarrassing that you don't acknowledge that. So that's like what people are really saying.
Yes.
Is you only like this thing because your memories of it are tainted by 20 years being removed from the thing. You were young and didn't understand any better, and the fact that you can't, in the modern day, acknowledge that is embarrassing.
Yeah.
Right? It is a incredibly presumptive thing because it's relying totally on the assumption, one, I haven't played this thing at all since 1990 whatever.
Yeah.
And it's not like I don't replay the thing once annually, probably, or have at least done so many times since then. And so it's assuming one is divorced from that experience for a long time and therefore can't remember it properly. Now, while that may be true for some people who play a game once and never play it again, it certainly isn't true for people who are like super into video games and discuss them all the time and are online talking about it and, probably replaying their favorites more than once throughout many, many years, that they have had a recent experience with the thing and remember it exactly how it is, not how it was to their 10-year-old brain 20 years removed. So it's like, imagine, for instance, if you went to a professional basketball player and said the only reason you like basketball is because you're blinded by nostalgia. Like how
You know what's
absurd a
unbelievable?
point that would be.
That's insane.
As if like, okay,
Yeah.
just because you liked it as a kid, you like it now. When the guy has dedicated his entire freaking life to it, plays for 8 to 10 hours
Yeah.
a day, practices literally all the time, and is more intimately knowledgeable about this game due to it being his literal life. Like how stupid that would be, right?
Yeah.
This is not to the same level, but adjacently stupid thing to say to someone who has played, for instance, Final Fantasy VII 25 times, and as recently as
In
maybe
25
like
years.
a few months ago,
Yeah.
and you're trying to say, no, it's just your nostalgia. That's the only reason you like it.
Right.
It's
It's like
literally
mind reading.
ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's literally ridiculous. and it's just a complete dick assumption to make.
Yeah.
It just outs you as like a total moron
Yeah.
to make that point to somebody without actually understanding, okay, why do they keep playing it? They may have played this recently. What makes them still enjoy it?
Yeah.
Like there's a million possible reasons for that outside of nostalgia being it.
Yeah.
So a couple weeks ago I did a episode on Mono no Oware with
Yeah.
Heian.
Yeah. That was a great episode. I
And
loved
in
it.
that episode, I cut out a part where we talked about this very thing.
Oh,
So I
yeah.
want to cut it into this
Great.
because he put it in a way that was freaking hilarious. And I just
Good.
love his thoughts on it in general. So let's cut that in to get that. I'm going to comment
Okay.
on that.
My primary objection to people using this term and why I don't think people should be using it almost at all is because it's really frickin' presumptuous. To draw a parallel, and I would like for people to consider this, like suppose you found a boyfriend or girlfriend and you're going to dinner with them, with me, your dear Uncle Heian. And let's imagine that your significant other in this scenario is very beautiful. They're quite attractive. And they go to the restroom. And I lean over and I tell you, yeah, you're just dating that person because they're hot, right? Like, that's the only reason you're dating them, right? Because of their parents, right? If I were to tell that to your face during that date, I hope you would smack me, like real good with a backhand. Obviously, when you're dating somebody, when you're in love with somebody, there's probably a level at which you're physically attracted to them. So we can grant that. But it would be very rude to reduce that to, well, it's just because, you're just with her or him because you want to bang them. Like, obviously, like clearly you don't care about their personality. Like,
Right. Yeah.
like if I sat there and acted like that, it's just like super presumptuous and rude. And the problem with the nostalgia sentiment is that it is exactly that, because you are not Psycho Mantis, right? Like, read your mind. Like, you just like this girl because she has a huge ass, right? Like, you're sitting on the other side of the planet, on the other side of a computer monitor on your phone, like reading comments. You do not know what this person is thinking or how they operate emotionally on any conceivable level. You have no freaking clue who they are. And on top of that, like, ask yourself in your brain, roll back the reel for a moment here and think about things that you liked as a kid that you look back on as an adult and you think is complete trash. Like, there is bound to be something there. And conversely, there's going to be things that you really didn't like as a child that you like as an adult. So for me, I grew up not liking Star Trek. I was a Star Wars kid through and through. I thought Star Trek was stupid and lame and boring. Star Trek The Next Generation, I marathoned it 2 years ago or something, is my second all-time favorite science fiction show of all time. And together with Babylon 5, right, which is my first spot. And I had no patience for either of those shows as a child. I love them now as an adult. Conversely, when I was a child, I told this to Mike too, and he hadn't even heard about it, which surprised me. But I was a real huge fan of the biker mice from Mars, right? As a child.
I literally never heard of this.
Cool.
This is crazy. I'd never heard of
Yeah,
it.
so these are, for those who don't know the show, it's like analogous to Ninja Turtles, except you have these mutant giant mice, like this squad of, I think, 4 or 3, and they ride these sci-fi motorcycles, and they're from Mars, and they kick ass, right? And I thought they were so cool as a kid, but I'm never watching that show ever again. Come on, like,
Yeah.
the animation, the music, like. Get out of here. No amount of nostalgia will ever save my this sort of adult brain's appreciation of that show. It's just never happening. And the reason, therefore, that this nostalgia argument is so extremely annoying is that, for example, everybody knows me on the server as the dude who can't stop talking about Final Fantasy VII. That's fine, right? That's one of my favorite games of all time. You want to come here and tell me that, oh, you just like it because of nostalgia. Your appreciation of that game is clouded by nostalgia. Well, how do you know that Final Fantasy VII isn't, for me, what TNG is, for example? Or how do you know that my sort of mental heuristics, the way my psychology perceives that game, is more in line with, for example, something that I am blinded by nostalgia about, as opposed to something that I'm not, right? And the fact that a human brain, a human psyche isn't so easily shoved into a simple box where you can just go, well, clearly, you like that as a kid, you like it as an adult, therefore nostalgia has to be that, can't be anything else. And it's also just like, it's so condescending because I said this before as well, like, I don't even like it when people say this with respect to companies. Disney, they just want to fuel off of nostalgia, or Square Enix, they're just remaking things to like make money off of nostalgia. I don't like this statement because it implies that those properties that they're bringing back didn't have any real value to begin with. Like, use your brain a bit to think about what you're actually expressing with your words there, because when you're saying, oh, they're just bringing back Final Fantasy VII because people have nostalgia for it, what you're basically saying is that Final Fantasy VII wasn't good in the first place. Like, it's just people's, childhood memories of it that is all cognitively impaired or biased. That is what it is communicating. And I don't think anyone on the internet is in a position to make that assertion. So I just don't have any patience for it. I think it's bad sort of culture to be constantly bringing that up with respect to conversations about older works. It just isn't relevant and isn't interesting.
It's like base level reasoning, just like it's like black and white, this or that.
The lowest level thinking possible, and just total unwillingness to engage with any other reason a person could have for enjoying something.
Gosh, yeah.
It's just absolutely irritating to the core to me when people make this kind of statement.
Yes. But uncles, sometimes you're like, look, man, not everyone's on your level. Not everyone's been where you've been. Not everyone, like, maybe not everyone is as smart as you are, not everyone. And oftentimes, like, if a random person said that to me, I'd be very offended. If my uncle said that to me, I'd be like, all right. I still love you, uncle. You're whatever. But I'm not like going to be as upset. That's the relationship thing. But when a stranger on the internet shows up to you, it's like, I don't know anything about you, but you seem to think you know me pretty well.
The other thing that annoys me to no end about this is that if someone's coming out and calling this game overrated, and the only reason you like it is because you have rose-tinted glasses, you're blinded by your nostalgia. Better, We're assuming, I think rightly in this case, this person's not the biggest fan of that thing. They think it's not that great.
That is what can be reasonably deduced,
Any time that a person's like they're not like really into it, they probably don't know the thing all that well.
Often
they haven't given it a really hard look. They haven't dedicated the time or energy to really trying to understand it. It didn't, gel with them. That's fine.
Yeah.
That's totally like valid. But like, you're not going to take a super deep dive look into something you don't like most of the time. So you're going to come into a conversation with somebody who's like a 20-year veteran and like knows this thing like the back of their hand and try to like talk to them about this thing as if you're on their level of understanding of it, and try to prescribe to them the reason they like it.
Oh, geez. That's like several levels of presumption deep. That's like unbelievably presumptuous.
It's literally unbelievable. Yeah. The just condescension and just totally irrational confidence a person would have in trying to make that kind of condescension to somebody. It's like, okay, for example, I'm not like the biggest fan in the world of first-person shooter games generally. So I don't really love the experience of playing Half-Life 2.
I see.
But I can't imagine ever walking up to somebody who is like a mega fan of Half-Life 2, who has played the game over and over again, who possibly made a video online talking about
Or
their
several.
reasons for loving it,
Yeah.
and walking into that conversation and being
This
like,
is so good.
dude, the only reason you like
man.
this is because it's nostalgic and you're blinded by your nostalgia.
Yeah.
Me, who has barely played this thing
Yeah.
and has mostly only watched your brother play it
Yes, me
because
too.
I don't enjoy it that much,
Yeah.
telling him,
Yeah.
nah, bro, you only like this because it makes you feel nostalgic for some like time period. It actually sucks.
See, now you're
I can't imagine doing that.
that's wild. But you're now running into basically the problem of the internet, which is a personal interaction and how that goes between two people in the same room as each other, now getting, digitalized into the ether, where you are thousands of miles away from the person you're criticizing, yet are still able to get in the same room as them, get onto their screen somehow and have your avatar change their emotional state, from this remote distance, right?
Yeah.
And how much easier it is to, maybe you wouldn't say it to someone's face, but maybe there's a part of you that might just kind of blurt it out on Twitter somewhere and then just kind of let that be as some kind of hot take or something,
It's not
And
even a take, though. That's what's so
that's a good
irritating.
point.
Like, when you use these terms, it's overrated or you are blinded by nostalgia, you aren't actually saying anything.
You're not actually saying anything.
Like, that's literally a substanceless statement to make.
Other than you are, as Heon pointed out, you are saying, I can read minds.
Yes.
That's what you're saying.
Which you can't,
It's more of-
obviously,
you're-
and everyone knows
exactly.
that.
You're saying
So
more
you're
about
saying
you.
nothing.
But you're saying more about yourself than you
Yes.
are the other person.
Yes, like, think about
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
What are you actually saying with that?
The only
'Cause
person, yeah.
I don't actually know you, person I'm fighting with
Yeah.
online, or even if it's a buddy. If you were to do that to your friend, which fetch you if you do that.
I have an example I'm going to bring up because I used to be a punk.
Well, let's hear it. Let's hear it
Okay.
first.
Our friend Jeremy. Great guy. Such a good guy. I really like him. I have a regretful moment of my life as it relates to I lobbed some blanket criticism of the show Lost in his direction after finding out that he was a fan of the show. And he loves the show. I have not really watched that much of it. I've watched season 1 and then maybe the first 2 episodes of season 2. And I kind of stepped away from the show and decided, I kind of going to do some other stuff with my time instead of 7 seasons. That's a big hour episodes. It's a big time commitment. I figured I'd just go to other stuff. I think I watched Bleach instead. But okay, which I also only got a few episodes in before I was like, I don't know if this is for me either. But I've not yet had that argument with anyone. I think Bleach is a fine show. It's just, it's like 7,000 episodes of it.
Yeah.
And I'm just not prepared for that. So anyways, I really regret this, and I think about this once a week. This is one of the bigger regrets of my life, is me getting into this argument with him, because it really offended him. And I now feel bad. At the time, I didn't feel bad at all. I was like, I'm just being objective and I'm just telling the truth. I'm just saying. Like, dude, I didn't know what I was talking about. I haven't seen the dang show. Like, I don't even know what I literally didn't know what I was talking about.
Yes.
Yet I felt so comfortable and smug to just sit back and be like, that show sucks. And, the only reason that, it's cash cow milking and, it's never going anywhere. And, I heard it ends bad and all that stuff. And he was like, you don't know any of this. But I carried the argument on for, I think, like at least an hour. I just kept kind of like, well, the only reason anyone would watch all 7 seasons is because they like it. So obviously someone who doesn't like it isn't going to watch all 7 seasons, but I'm still allowed to have a critique, right? But my critiques were so low quality and they were so poor, yet I was levying them at someone who I do consider to be a friend, somebody who I drove to his house in like Sacramento, because he wanted to introduce me to his family and friends. And it was like this meaningful, and I like, and it's like a 13-hour drive or something like that. And I like feel so bad about it now. But at the time, I kind of really didn't. I had this weird, different thing going on that I'm sure you could probably tell me more about myself than I could about myself during that time period when I would just like to argue with people.
I think you're being like a little hard on yourself.
I know, I probably am.
To a certain extent. But I mean, I do remember a couple of times we're growing up, like, we're in an argument about something, and I'm just like, this is the dumbest thing. Like, why are we arguing about this?
Because
Like,
I
this
liked
is not,
to argue.
Yeah, it was just kind of a quirk of your personality,
Yes.
and I realized that at a certain point, and was like, I'm just not going to let it get to me. It's fine. kind of thing.
There's something entertaining about arguing a stupid point. I don't know what it is, and it's something I really don't do as much anymore. Although, judge ye, I guess I talk for a few hours a week on this show. Maybe I still do it from time to time, but it's something I have basically exercised out of my being in terms of, you know, the way that I present myself now. But gosh, I feel so bad about that even still. And I still think about it like, why did I do that? Why couldn't I just admit that he probably was right and that I just didn't know what I was talking about?
He understood
Why was it
better.
so hard for me to admit, right? I held to my guns for so long. And it really did damage our relationship, I think. Even years later,
really?
It's like I never apologized for that. I didn't want to bring it up anymore after that. I was kind of embarrassed afterwards. Like, geez, that was kind of dumb. I shouldn't have done that, but I didn't want to bring it up, you know. And you know, he's somebody who I've lost contact with. Hey, if you're listening, dude, hey, let's hang out sometime. But I don't know.
I worked with his wife up at Game Tyrant. She did some hosting for us on some video stuff before they got married. And so it was like this small world kind of moment where it's like,
That's
my
crazy.
boyfriend, or I was like, Jeremy, what oh my gosh, like it's the Jeremy, like you're dating
Jeremy.
the Jeremy, and they got married.
He was in a few of our Dark Pixel videos,
he
actually.
was. Okay, so I think it's fun that you shared that story because it kind of illustrates the point. Like this tendency to want to like argue on something that you might not even really be all of that knowledgeable about. I feel like a lot of times that's where a sentiment like that comes from. And it's why
like a
it's
contrarian
so
kind of mindset.
irritating because, again, it's all presumption. You don't know me. You don't know my experience with this thing or my reasons for why it works for me or whatever. Or you ignore all of that in my video that I made and you're just going to like throw out this blanket statement. It's just, I think it really outs a person as being somebody who's, one, not willing to really think about this on a deeper level. A person who's super arrogant and presumptive, and thinks they know it all,
and not approaching the situation in good faith.
No, they're not at all.
Which is probably the thing that bothers me the most about my former self, is that like I hate to think of myself as having not approached situations in good faith ever.
Yeah,
but it's like, I did that a lot actually. Sometimes
the other thing that annoys me about this though is that it's the whole sentiment of it is just not accurate.
Yes,
like the term nostalgia is not just a blanket a synonym to having good memories with something. Like it's a much deeper, true emotion that I have experienced, if I'm being generous, like a handful of times in actuality in real life.
It's like formative memories. It's like memories that like contribute to your being, like who you are, instead of just like nice memories from the past.
Like when I have actually experienced the sensation, the feeling, the emotion of nostalgia, I can think of two in particular. Once I walked down into my grandmother's basement, and there's a specific combination of the smell and the cooler air of the basement hitting at the same time that took me back probably 20 years to that same house, same basement when I was sleeping down there and I got really, really sick.
Oh,
so I had like a horrible flu and I was hallucinating.
So it wasn't
the whole
even a
night.
good memory.
No. It wasn't a bad one necessarily either. I just, it's almost fleeting. It's almost like a fraction of a second.
Yes.
You're just transported back to that moment and you have the same feelings, the same sensations. And it's just this disconcerting, whoa, wow, that was crazy. Deja vu like type of experience.
Yeah. I hallucinated once during a situation like this. I tasted eggnog for the first time in years.
Yeah.
And I was at because eggnog's expensive, dude. So like when I was a student in college, I didn't buy this stuff. But I did learn how to make some homemade eggnog, but it didn't quite taste like the real thing.
Yeah.
But I took a sip and I looked out towards the dining room when I was back at home at my parents' house and I saw a Christmas tree. It was right there. I literally saw it, and I was like, whoa, when did you guys put that thing up? Because it was like October, like eggnog starts being sold a little early on. And I looked back, and it was gone. And I was like, what happened? Like, it's something that I remembered forever, but it was like this wild, like basically a hallucination that was brought on by just the sip and probably the coolness as well. Just the smell, the taste of the eggnog brought me back several years to the point, and that is where our family did put up the Christmas tree. So it was, I swear, I remember
like
seeing it right there.
A true flashback moment.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like I couldn't tell the difference between reality and not reality at that moment.
So to me, that is what the experience of nostalgia actually is. And it's actually very, very rare. Like you don't have this all the time.
And you can't control when it happens.
No, it just happens.
Yeah.
So that is not the same thing as when we sit here discussing our childhood memories of booting up the PC version of Final Fantasy VII and watching through all the cutscenes and spoiling the game for ourselves. Right, because they were all in a folder that we were navigating through the file hierarchy.
Watch them all.
Like when we talk about that and we reminisce on a good memory, that's not nostalgia. The emotion, the sensation of nostalgia. That's not what happens when we're having that conversation. We laugh and we remember, and it's a good reminiscing moment. But that's not nostalgia.
You know, I do sometimes use that word, though, when we talk about this. I'll say, oh, this was a nostalgic moment. I think the word nostalgic maybe means nostalgia-like a moment that mimics nostalgia.
And I think there's degrees to this.
Sure, perfect.
That's
like
the sort of like really rare moment I'm talking about. I kind of like define that as being
that's
sensation
the gold
of
standard
nostalgia.
Of nostalgia.
But I think there's like a lesser, but still like a, oh wow, I get this warm feeling remembering this. That's maybe like somewhere approaching it, but not really that close to it.
Sure, I can get behind that.
Like,
that's fine.
So I'll grant that. Like that I think you can call that fairly nostalgic.
Yeah. For Metal Gear Solid 2, I'm pretty sure I used that word in the episode that goes up in 2 days.
Yeah, exactly. So none of that is what's going on when I'm online talking about, I'll stop using FF7 as an example, Prince of Persia or some other thing that I was obsessed with as a kid and continued to replay and revisit and talk about and discuss with people online. That feeling has nothing to freaking do at all with my opinions on that game. That I played as recently as last year or maybe months ago. I remember it very clearly. Yeah. I have played it many, many times and remember it a lot better than a person who tried it once and didn't like it back in the day and wants to come in here and call overrated and say that the only reason someone likes it is due to nostalgia. Yeah. You're misremembering it. I'm literally not. I'm literally deeply familiar with this and like have studied its development history like up and down. Like, what are you talking about, dude?
So when the specific phrase I think that we are contending with here is blinded by nostalgia.
Yes.
Meaning you see nothing but what you saw when you were 10 and you played it the first time, right? You aren't seeing anything else.
Yes.
But it's impossible to approach good art, in a way that you don't come away changed each time you see it, right? And once again, I say this as someone who did this myself. The person leveling the "you're blinded by nostalgia" criticism is revealing more about themselves than they are about the person that they're criticizing.
Yes.
And one of the things that might be revealed through the course of levying that criticism is that you don't understand how good art works or how art works just in general, right? Maybe their criticism is that it's not good art. Okay, fine. But every time I have played a game from my childhood, like you already mentioned this more or less, but like I have a wildly different experience. Every time I read The Lord of the Rings, I have a very different, unique, individual experience each time I read those books that is very different, often very different from the first time I played it. Like you mentioned before, a lot of the stuff about Final Fantasy VII, you didn't even understand that stuff back when you first played it.
Not at all.
So how could you be blinded by nostalgia when you are literally uncovering new things, finding deeper meaning, finding more, I don't know, motivations, finding new stuff in this game that you didn't see when you were younger. See, like there's a bit of a miss here.
Yes.
And it makes me wonder if some of these people maybe aren't quite, maybe they don't have the same experience with art that they should. Like if you are going to level the blinded by nostalgia criticism, I think you should go back and play some of your own childhood games and see how differently they feel now that you're an adult. And then, because you can't be face to face, it's the internet. I don't know. It's just, you could, but it's maybe a little more expensive. Maybe people don't want to do it as much. But at the very least, you can go back and play something that you liked 15 years ago, and then realize that you're having a very different experience than the first time that you played it. And like, awesome. That's great.
Yeah.
And maybe the word blinded is probably an even worse offense than the word nostalgia at that point, where it's like, look, that's just not how this stuff works. If you read the same book twice, you can't be blinded by the first time you read it. Maybe it's like, oh, you aren't open to the flaws.
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe. But that's life, right? Like you're constantly picking through the world to find the things of value and to discard, to, separate the wheat from the chaff, right? And if there's something valuable enough that the chaff is like worth wading through in order to come to that gem, it's worth it to dig through the dirt to find the diamond or the Arkenstone, lying underneath, then yeah, of course I'm ignoring all the dirt. I'm looking for the diamond.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm ignoring the dirt. Yes, I know I'm doing that. There's a diamond. Did you not see there's a diamond here? I don't know if you know this. And then sometimes people focus too much on the dirt. This is the Pan's Labyrinth fairy tale that Ophelia reads to her little brother, where she says there's like a rose that grows on the top of a mountain, and whoever can get to it.
The thorns.
Yeah, but it's surrounded by thorns, and all people ever talked about was the thorns, right? And it's like, but it's worth it to wade through the thorns to get the highest, most beautiful thing. That's worth it. But not if people are constantly just pointing out all of the negative things about it, right?
Yeah, right.
Often when you say that you like Final Fantasy VII, you're not saying that it is a completely flawless experience.
No.
You're saying that there's gold and diamonds and mythical material to mine beneath the substrate. That's what you're saying. Yes. And that it's worth whatever amount of dirt there might be covering them, right? Like you don't just find diamonds laying on the earth.
It's a beautiful way to say it.
But that Pan's Labyrinth fairy tale, like it's so potent. It's so potent because I often find that there are certain people who may consider themselves skeptics. And skepticism, once again, it's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing, but there is an over-reliance or an over, how would you put it? You can go to an extreme with your skepticism to where you're just skeptical of everything and you're just second guessing everyone. And you have the hermeneutic of just suspicion about everything. And yeah, like that's a way to go through life, I suppose. And you're going to be right about a lot of things like Socrates, like Socrates discovered. If you just ask enough questions in a skeptical way, you will discover that the person you're talking to may not have the firmest grasp on whatever assumptions, or may not realize the assumptions they've made to get to whatever point that they've kind of embraced.
Right.
Fair enough. But are you going to embrace nothing? Are you going to just go around tearing things down? Or are you going to look for beautiful, valuable things and then cherish and treasure them?
Yeah. And this is actually a big part of the reason why this came up in the Mananaware topic, because the analogy that is often used with that concept is the cherry blossom falling and so
So I say diamond, but
you have
it's better to think of it as a moment.
Experience going to watch that once, one season several years ago. It's not going to be the same experience, even though you go again under different contexts with different people
to a different mountain,
or a different forest or whatever. Yeah. And the leaves fall, or the flower petals fall a little differently. And maybe it's colder that day, or there's all these.
It's always sad when it rains that week.
Of variables that would change this experience this time around from last time. And that's the exact same thing you're talking about with revisiting something that you loved before and having a lot of different context around it that makes the experience a totally different thing.
I like that example
And so
a lot.
if you're doing that often with something
Mike,
that you love,
you only go watch Cherry Blossoms because you didn't know better when you were a child.
that's
Think
a
of telling
perfect
a Japanese
example
person that
of
for
how
Hanami.
dumb that sounds.
Yeah.
You only like cherry blossoms because you went with your grandfather and you're 5 years old and you have
And he's dead
nostalgic
now.
memories.
Yeah.
But this is actually super overrated. Look how dumb those look how dumb those flowers look. It's so stupid.
Oh gosh. Okay.
You sound so stupid when you say this, people. You are an idiot if you are making this argument. It's ridiculous.
Oh my gosh, that is so funny. Oh, that is so funny. And once again, if you have been or are that kind of person, as I have been, and maybe sometimes still am, like it is what it is. But we can try to do better, you know? Like I am of the personality where I still sometimes maybe get a little smile when I'm just screwing with somebody. And like sometimes with my kids, I'll just like give them, you know, riddles, or I'll mess with them in certain ways and give them brain teasers and whatnot.
Yeah, right.
It's kind of fun to just kind of mess with somebody. But see more things with rose-tinted glasses.
Yeah.
See the person you're interacting with rose-tinted, the same rose-tinted glasses you're accusing them of using to play their favorite game when they were 12.
Yeah.
Borrow those for a second and see them with those glasses.
Yeah,
See the world with those same glasses. They're good glasses. They're not bad glasses. It's not a bad way to see the world.
Yeah, I think the point I want to make.
And if you are or have been that kind of person, redemption is available to you.
Your
it is
redemption
there.
arc is on the horizon.
You can be saved, but you gotta stop. You gotta stop.
I've kind of been harping on this a lot recently, but it's just something that's important to me at this particular part of my life, and that is learning to not make assumptions about people, learning to temper yourself, because it's natural to make assumptions. I think it's part of how we do our best to survive as a species and avoid danger.
Yes.
You know,
and skepticism is a good way to avoid danger. It's also a good way to avoid everything.
It's not like I'm saying you should or even can purge yourself of the inclination to make assumptions, but you should
that's not possible.
Curb the tendency and ask people questions first.
Yeah, before you make a negative assumption.
Instead of making an assumption about why you like going to see the cherry blossoms, I should ask you,
Isn't pine needles better?
What is it about this that I don't really get it? What is it about this that you...
If you ask a Japanese person what it is about Hanami that makes it so special with the sakura blossoms, they will tell you.
Yeah.
And it will probably change your life if you speak Japanese.
They probably
or if they speak English.
Wrote poems about it.
They have
whatever.
likely read hundreds of poems about the beauty of the sakura blossoms, and they have likely been on Hanami, flower watching parties with friends and family ever since they were a child.
Yeah.
And they will tell you. The question is, will you listen?
Yes. That's it. That's really it. Are you willing to ask a question and listen?
Yeah.
Or are you just going to throw your
cast your stones
ridiculous,
at glass houses?
uninformed, not even opinion. It's not even a statement. It's literally substanceless thing to just like, I don't know, piss on people's flames.
Piss on the fire.
And just make a mess of it and then just peace out. Like, what are you doing?
Okay, I just thought of a rebuttal. What? I'm giving you a comment. I'm giving you engagement on your podcast. Don't you want that?
I
kind of know.
Don't even really respond to this type of thing anymore because
that's good.
I understand that it's pointless and that what the person literally they might as well have written the word nothing instead of whatever you're blinded by nostalgia. Like it literally doesn't mean anything.
Right.
But this really would have gotten me up in arms as a 22-year-old or something like that. Be like, no, you don't get it.
I'm not blinded. Write a 12-page tirade against
and then we go back and forth a million
about how
times,
objective you're actually being.
And the point is, like, I've come to realize that, like you're saying, they're saying a lot more about themselves when they say that
They're
than
revealing
they're
a lot
saying about
themselves.
me.
Yeah.
Like, I'm a person who's like almost always like consciously trying to approach everything I do in life in good faith. And I like make it a very, very big part of what I do. And so
I do now.
coming across somebody, it's kind of like they describe with, what's the name of the leader of the Valar?
Manwë? Manwë, yeah.
The way that Tolkien describes Manwë and his continuance or trying to give
His
Melkor
mercy.
more chances
Yes.
is that he is a person who has zero understanding of evil.
Yeah.
And so like when he encounters it, he just can't understand it
Can't comprehend it.
and then therefore continually is tricked or like deceived. It's a similar kind of thing where it's like a person who is adamant about trying to approach life and people in good faith all the time comes across someone who is not doing that, who is purposefully trolling or who is purposefully trying to cause a fight or a problem.
There's a movie.
You just can't, you don't make that assumption about them. You don't assume that they're here to just get a rise out of you.
Yeah, nobody would approach this in bad faith.
You're like, no, they're making that argument in good faith. What a bad argument. I've got to like actually engage.
With like logic.
I've got to engage.
Yeah.
And like, sometimes you just got to realize like this dude's is not on the same level as you in terms of the faith in which you're approaching this.
No, but one day they can be. And that makes it sound like we're like this high level. It's like, look, I don't know. Just there are certain things that I can say, more certainly. And one of them is that first off, people can change. Second off, just don't be like just a pointless, meaningless like jerk to people. Like, probably those two things.
Okay, I will say this. I'm not even going to tell you not to do that.
Yeah.
But do it in a way that's not as dumb as this.
Oh yeah, at least be funny. at least like get some witty.
Some wit. Yeah. At least have some thought behind what you're saying.
Then we might consider your point.
Then like at least I can be like, well, that's at least a smart comment, even though it's condescending and you're being an asshole to me. At least that's a thought worth engaging with. Sure. At least it's not the dumbest thing you could have said.
At least it's not like literally nothing. You may as well have said nothing.
At least it's like literally zero substance to what you're talking about.
The movie Bernie, by the way, if you've seen it, Jack Black plays this character who cannot comprehend someone who doesn't act in good faith.
Yeah.
It's a crazy movie. He ends up in prison, people. So.
Yeah. Anyway, this is a shorter episode. I have been just buried in work this week, working 12-hour days, and so it's like literally right now here 12:30. Kaysen's got to drive home. So sorry, it's a little shorter this week, but this was a topic that we had a little bit of a spark of passion about in our planning session. Wanted to get it out there, vent a little bit on that particular issue. I feel better about it now.
Do you feel better?
And
those clouds, they dispersed as soon as we started yelling. Did you see that?
Yeah.
We did something. It actually made a difference.
Yeah, now no one will ever say that again on the internet. Anyway, appreciate you guys. Look forward to Metal Gear Solid. It's coming in a couple days. Till then, peace out.